So our next one is pantothenic acid. Pantothenic acid is one of those enzymes that is everywhere. It's pretty difficult to actually get a deficiency in pantothenic acid unless you are specifically feeding a diet that you have intentionally, like you're feeding a purified diet, pure glucose, each amino acid separately, pure fat. That's the only way that you get the deficiencies. It's a component of two major enzyme cofactors. One is the acyl carrier protein, and this one is critical for fat synthesis. So fatty acid synthesis, you need the acyl carrier protein, and pantothenic acid is a component of that protein. So without it, you can't make the acyl carrier protein, and therefore you can't make fat. The next one is coenzyme A, also known as CoA. Can you think of where you've heard of CoA before?
It's an aspiration, or the electron transport gene. Is it the acetyl-CoA?
Right, so it's a acetyl-CoA.
Oh, right,
So this is, without pantothenic acid, you're not going to get coenzyme A. So if you don't have coenzyme A, pyruvate can't get into the Krebs cycle, and you're not going to get any more ATP made. So that results in every cell, then you've shut down the TCA cycle. And so then everything is dependent on glycolysis. Do you guys remember glycolysis? Have I ever really talked about glycolysis before?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first step of sugar breakdown, glucose breakdown is glycolysis. So it goes from glucose down to pyruvate. If you have oxygen, it goes into the TCA cycle. If you don't have oxygen, the pyruvate's converted to lactic acid. So if you have coenzyme A that you can make the acetyl, that can bind to the acetyl-CoA, then you can have the TCA cycle. If you don't have pantothenic acid, you don't get CoA, your glucose can only, you're then relegated for it to have to be converted to lactate or lactic acid. Sources, it's, like I said, it's pretty much everywhere. You have it in wheat bran, alfalfa meal, fish solubles. It's a little on the low end in our corn soybean meal diets. So we still put it in the vitamin and mix, but it's very hard to get the clinical deficiency symptoms because all plants and all animals, all those cells are utilizing the same mechanisms. So every cell has some CoA or ACP in it. So that's why it's so hard to get a deficiency. But if you do get a deficiency, things are going to be dermatitis. And you're going to get decreased hatchability. And then you get this thing called goose stepping. So the goose stepping, it essentially is, it causes the nerve system to tingle, because it's also part of the myelin sheath, mix up components of the myelin sheath. Myelin sheath covers all the nerves, right? So without the myelin sheath, it's essentially similar to your nerve being exposed, like you would have an exposed wire, right? Electrical wire. What happens if you take the insulation off of the electrical wire? What?
It could rust.
It could rust. What else are you going to get if you're if you go turn the lights on and the mouse is chewed up on one of your wires, it's gonna short out, so it's gonna flicker. It may not always keep the charge, the electrical charge going through the wire. So that's why the insulation is important. And so you get this goose stepping because animals have like pins and needles on their feet all the time. And that's because they don't have the myelin sheath around, which is resulting in the pins and needles. The dermatitis ends up happening because since you don't have the energy to be replenishing your skin cells, you're going to result in that's having the dermatitis. So if your cells don't have energy to proliferate and regenerate, then they're not going to be able to have the protection. So you reduce that dermal layer. We have 4 different layers that make up the dermis. So if you can't regenerate the bottom one, you're not going to get adequate levels to where you have the dense skin on top that helps protect you. So that results in dermatitis. Do you guys know what dermatitis actually means?
Just inflammation of skin.
Right, skin infection. So anything that's an itis is infection. All right, folic acid. Folic acid, where have you heard of the importance of folic acid before?
It's not digesting, right?
No, we haven't talked about it at all in this class specifically, but Caitlin, if you happen to get pregnant, what would your doctor tell you?
Prenatal vitamins.
Prenatal vitamins, folic acid. What happens if you don't have folic acid? Why are those prenatal vitamins so critical? What's it preventing? Yes, spinal bifida. So folic acid is a coenzyme acceptor. So it's part of what we call 1-carbon metabolism. And get into this in obnoxious detail in 415. But so it's 1-carbon metabolism. It interacts with methionine, so it's involved in methionine metabolism and methyl cycles. It's involved in making purines and pyrimidines. Where have you heard of purines and pyrimidines, and why are they critical for an animal?
That's what DNA is composed of.
DNA and RNA is composed of purines and pyrimidines. So that's your A, G, C, and T, and your U. So different sources. You can make folic acid. Bacteria can make it in the hindgut. So if you practice coprophagy, you'll get folic acid. A lot of the feedstuffs are adequate, so really we don't get too many deficiency symptoms in livestock. Tough part with people is there's high concentrations of it in our green leafy vegetables. So if you have green leafy, if you are don't eat adequate green leafy vegetables, you run the risk of being deficient in folic acid. The reason why women are told to take prenatal vitamins is there is a genetic mutation that's involved in this 1-carbon metabolism that affects 5% of the population. As far as mutations go, that is very significant. And that mutation results in a reduction in this 1-carbon metabolism. You can overcome it by over-consuming folic acid. So instead of a doctor testing every woman or waiting until they find out that her baby has a neural tube defect, they just tell every woman, take extra folic acid to cover their bases. Deficiency results in, well, litter types, so this is for pigs or other animals. You'll get reduced egg production. You get poor growth and megaloblastic anemia. So why would you think, and I'm going to preface this saying that we are inhibiting our purines and pyrimidines, so why do we get poor growth?
Is it because DNA synthesis is slowed down?
Right, so if we don't have, because during our growth phase, our cells are still proliferating, right, and expanding. So if we don't have the purines and pyrimidines, we're not able to undergo mitosis. So if you can't duplicate all of your DNA, you're gonna stay in maintenance, and that's why we have poor growth. So they don't grow at all. Megaloblastic anemia. So most of the time when people think of anemia, you think of what's causing it. Lack of iron. So lack of iron causes microcytic anemia, where your red blood cells are really small. Megaloblastic anemia is your red blood cells are very big. And a lot of times that's because they are immature. So because we don't have the purines and pyrimidines, the DNA, yeah.
Wouldn't it be like good for an athlete though? So more red blood cells, the bigger they are, the better?
Well, it doesn't hold any more oxygen.
Oh, okay.
So the problem is the red blood cells are immature.
Okay.
So they
That's what I was thinking.
we don't have, they're not quite ready. So it's what, like if you had a high school player, basketball player that tries to go into the draft in high school, they're gonna get pushed around if they do get into the NBA, versus if you go through the college system and then go into the NBA, you're a little more prepared for the professional nature that I'm trying to pull from potential analogies that I'm not that great at. So the megaloblastic, these are immature red blood cells. They don't have all the oxygen holding capacity. So that's why they are big. All right, our next one goes with folic acid. This is B12. So this is the one that I told you is going to be the only one that you have to know the number for. B12 is also known as cobalamin or cyanocobalamin. It is also involved in one-carbon metabolism. Now, this vitamin is the one that you need in the lowest amounts. So you really don't need much B12. So our people that like to claim they're obligate carnivores, they say, well, I need to eat meat because I need B12. You don't need to eat that much meat because you just need a couple parts per billion of B12. It's also involved in our one-carbon metabolism. It works with folic acid. So the 3 cycles that these are involved in, this one-carbon metabolism, is 3 different metabolic pathways that all work together. B12 is on one side, folic acid's on the other. So a lot of times you can be deficient in B12 but may get misdiagnosed as folic acid because the symptoms are similar to where you also get megaloblastic anemia with B12. The sources of your B12 that you're going to get is animal products. So this is going to be milk, eggs, meat. Our plant products do not have very much They don't have B12. Your bacteria can synthesize it. So if you're relying on bacterial synthesis, you need to have cobalt. So our ruminants have a cobalt requirement. They do not have a B12 requirement. So like a Hoatzin probably has a cobalt requirement as opposed to a B12 requirement, because they do all the fermentation before their stomach. Now the other thing with the B12, you need to have, if you do not eat animal products, you then are, to meet your B12, let's say if you were gonna be vegan. You're gonna be vegan, you have to take a B12 supplement. Have to. Because your plant products don't have it. The only other sources that you get is bacterial synthesis. Where do you think the bacteria are going to be synthesizing B12? Where do you have high numbers of bacteria in your GI tract? GI tract. Liver is not GI. It's an accessory organ.
I guess small intestines.
Not small,
Large.
large intestine. So our hindgut fermenters, such as the chicken, pigs, horses, rabbits, they get their B12 by practicing coprophagy. Do you guys know what coprophagy is? And can you give me a guess, knowing that bacteria are in the colon and in the ceca, or cecum, if you're gonna meet your B12, being herbivore, you have to practice coprophagy. What do you think coprophagy means? Any of you guys ever have a rabbit? What?
No, not a couple of.
So coprophagy is you eat poop.
Huh? That's what you do.
No, I work.
So you actually get some.
So typically, most hindgut fermenters are gonna specifically, they will once a day contract their cecum or ceca, and you get the cecal droppings. And that's what they're consuming, is typically more the cecal droppings. So this is the pasty component. So, but our omnivorous animals, so we are omnivores, we're eating plant products. This is part of the reason why we're not as dependent, and why I will say scientifically that eating animal products is beneficial for humans, because one, I don't have a very, well, right now I don't have any sort of cecum because I had my appendix removed. So you either, as a vegan, you need to either take a supplement or practice coprophagy, is what I like to tell my students.
I feel like
Alrighty.
a supplement would be better.
It might be more expensive, but.
I mean, it's a pinch.
So vegans are the most likely to be put in that situation. Vegetarians, because they're likely to be eating eggs and dairy, they just don't eat meat, they should be getting adequate B12, because like I said, this one is, this is the lowest requirement that you need. So all other vitamins are parts per million, ppm. So that ends up being a milligram per kilogram. B12 is part per billion, which ends up being microgram per kilogram. So you don't need much. You need like microgram per day.
So vegetarians don't need, like,
They don't need to take a supplement. It's primarily, if they're eating,
is
is
it
egg,
dairy and
milk,
eggs?
right, they'll get it from there. But if you're vegan, you're at risk of becoming
So we're talking in between like being vegetarian, being vegan. If you're gonna do it, go all out.
Some
Oh, I
can't
know.
give up, some can't give up cheese. I had
That's
a,
hard for a lot of people,
That would be hard.
especially when you have to go buy things. Because butter's in like everything.
cheese and butter, yeah, the dairy products. So deficiency here, you're gonna get megaloblastic anemia, and just like with folic acid, those are the main things. So, oh, the other thing, when you are, the critical thing, why you need to consume B12, it has to go through your stomach. There is this component in it, that in your stomach, for it to be absorbed, it binds intrinsic factor. This is released from your stomach. It binds B12. So once your B12 bound to intrinsic factor reaches the ileum, the third section of the small intestine, the B12 is going to be absorbed. But if it's not bound to intrinsic factor, you can't absorb it. So if you've ever had a grandparent, maybe a great-grandparent that needs to go and get a B12 shot. Have you guys ever had that before? My husband's grandmother, always, when she hit 90, she started being very lethargic. They found out that she was deficient in B12. She ate meat, so the problem was her stomach stopped releasing intrinsic factor. So she had to go and get a shot of B12 in her arm every 6 months. So that's the only other way. If you're not going to consume it, you have to get it in a shot. And that's because of this intrinsic factor. So geriatric people are more at risk of B12 deficiency also, because as you get older, your stomach's not as efficient and you don't release very much intrinsic factor. B6, I guess this would be the other one. B6, we call B6 because there are many different forms. We have 6 derivatives. So this is pyridoxal, pyridoxine, peroxamine, and then you have your phosphate derivatives. This is another one that is very hard to get deficiency because it's in everything. It's a coenzyme for over 100 different enzymes, and the majority of those enzymes are involved in amino acid metabolism. So any amino acid that you're breaking down for gluconeogenesis or ketogenesis, you need B6 for. You find this in your cereal grains, meat, fish, non-citrus fruits. If you do happen to get a deficiency, you're going to get low blood hemoglobin. So you're going to have low hemoglobin and high iron. So because you have low hemoglobin, you don't have, so the iron is the central component of your hemoglobin. So with low hemoglobin, that results in that being broken down, the iron's going into your plasma. Why don't we want high plasma iron? some things wrong, but think back to our vitamin E. Why is having high iron bad? What does our vitamin E do? So our iron is causing oxidation. It's our primary cause of oxidation. So we don't want high plasma iron because we're going to run the risk of oxidizing a lot of our tissues, fats, etc.
Excuse me.
All right. This is the last one. Last one is choline. Choline's referred to as a, some people call it a pseudo vitamin. It's not a true vitamin. We add this, poultry have higher requirements. Do fish have higher requirements for choline?
You know, I was reading about that. I'm too tired to know. I don't know. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's the precursor for acetylcholine. And do you guys remember what acetylcholine does? I don't remember if I've talked to you guys about this. So acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter. It's the neurotransmitter that's released from the parasympathetic nervous system, and related to nutrition, this is what's controlling passage rate. So if you don't have choline, you're gonna inhibit your acetylcholine. Choline's also involved in your methionine metabolism. Our source, we put it in the diet as choline chloride. Now, if you were to utilize at the feed mill pure choline chloride, this is very hygroscopic. Do you guys know what hygroscopic means? It absorbs water. So pure choline chloride is just, it takes water out of the air. So one story I have, when I was a graduate student, I had to make every component of my diet. I had to make my own vitamin mix. I had to make my own mineral mix. My advisor was very into having us know every component of the diet. One day when I was making diets, I saw in the lab choline chloride there on the shelf, so I never thought to verify because it was on the shelf. If it's on the shelf, it should be there, right? Do you think that was a mistake? Very much a mistake. So I go to make my feed, I open it up, all water. So it pulled all the water out of the air, and I just had this, I mean, it was mixed up in the water, but so that is not the proper form. So pure choline chloride will absorb water. So because of that, when we feed it in the diet, we mix it, so it's only 60% choline chloride. I don't remember what we mix it with, but whatever we mix it with is brown. And so to meet your requirement, you factor in there's only 60% choline chloride. Deficiencies from choline is you're going to get fatty liver. So poultry, we make all of our fat in our liver. That's also with humans too. I'm assuming fish. So our we'll get fatty liver.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you said that the choline's essential?
Yeah,
But I think what's interesting, and we'll talk more about this later, but in terms of the chloride part, fish are really kind of oddballs for monogastrics because those that are living in marine environments deal with the chlorides differently.
really.
Yeah, because if they're in the marine environment, then they're always around like sodium chloride in the salt.
Right.
So
That's true. Never thought about that. You also get kidney necrosis. What does that mean?
These guys.
Right, so you get, the kidney gets necrotic, and then that leads to kidney failure. I think that's all for vitamins. Oh wait, no, vitamin C, almost. So vitamin C, this is also known as ascorbic acid. Know that, because usually on the exam, I typically will ask which vitamin is not a water-soluble vitamin, and I don't put vitamin C, I put ascorbic acid. Vitamin C is, and I mentioned it a little bit when we were talking about with vitamin E, that it's an antioxidant. So it essentially will take the product when the vitamin E takes the reactive oxygen species, vitamin C will regenerate that. It takes that, so it's able to regenerate the vitamin E. It also works with glutathione peroxidase. So that's what vitamin C does. Swine and poultry, we do not need to incorporate it into the diet. Fish the same,
we definitely want to incorporate vitamin C in the diet.
so they have to,
And water stable or heat stable vitamin C for the extruded diets, very important. Yeah.
okay.
Vitamin C is essential. I mean, it's not an essential vitamin, I think, but it's
So fish can't make it, depending on the species.
depending on the species and the circumstances. But let me say that, yeah, vitamin C is incredibly important, and there's one type called Stay C, we'll talk about this later, and there are some that are really heat stable for the extrusion process, and more water stable also because of being in the aquatic environment. The tendency for it to leach out, very
Okay.
important.
But swine and poultry, we can make it. They can synthesize their own. Humans cannot. So this is why there was a disease that was known among sailors that they got. Scurvy. I need to start adding more pictures to this, but then it would just go on longer. So scurvy essentially is, vitamin C is also involved in wound healing. And you end up having to where the gums and everything get inflamed, and they start losing their teeth. And because they're not able to regenerate their gum tissue. And so that's where the pirates and sailors would get scurvy, and that plagued various naval empires, especially the British, until once they figured it out that, they didn't know that it was vitamin C, but they discovered that fruits was the thing that was preventing it, and they started having their sailors eat oranges. And when they started eating oranges, that quote unquote cured scurvy. So there are a lot of various diseases that people thought were diseases, but they were really just nutrient deficiencies. I think that's all. So we got a few minutes. I'd like to, come on up.
If I can have a couple minutes, I'm excited
Yeah.
to be here.
So, unbeknownst to the four of you, even though Tyler's new, this is Mike. Mike is
Hey, nice to meet you.
officially meeting. He is officially the TA for this class. You're getting your PhD?
Yeah, I was kind of somewhere in the ether, yeah, right.
So he is getting his PhD with Dr. Peter Firket. And he is a true blue fish nutritionist. So with him getting his PhD, I asked him if he would TA, and with that, teach the aquaculture nutrition component, because I don't know anything about fish, as you guys have figured out.
She knows a lot about fish.
Tyler, who is the one that is probably working on his paper that's due today.
Oh, okay.
He's the one that's truly interested in our fish nutrition.
Okay.
But we have Caitlin, Cooper, and Zach that are here, so we don't have.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm excited to be here, and I thought I'd just spend a couple minutes just to introduce myself. Dr. Livingston and I, we're going to brainstorm a little bit about what exactly it is that I'm going to be lecturing with you guys. So, yeah, I've been finishing my graduate certificate. My master's from Mississippi State many years ago was in fish nutrition. And for the last 25 years at NC State, I've been working with the Cooperative Extension Service. So I'm full-time aquaculture, have been for 30 years. I'm originally from Illinois, and
You in Illini?
no, I'm a Redbird.
Oh,
You're in Illini. My dad's in Illini, yeah.
I guess so. So my father-in-law is a,
Is he a Redbird?
yeah.
Really?
Is Illinois State?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm from Bloomington, actually.
So is my husband.
No way.
My father-in-law was the assistant chief of police there,
What is his name?
Kevin Livingston.
Oh, we can tell. I don't know if that. But
We'll talk later.
Yeah, that's great. Interesting. It's a small world, okay? So I've been working mainly. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to just introduce myself is to give an idea. I want to pump you up a little bit because I'm excited. I've been doing aquaculture my career. I had experiences before. I finished my BS 2 years. I was like on the 9-year program because I traveled and I worked. I was in Alaska. I did stuff in factories. And finally it was like, I want to follow my heart, get back into science. And I was interested in really just getting into like aquatic zoology, dolphins, marine biology. And one time my later-to-be father-in-law, I was dating his daughter at the time, I was talking about dolphins and whales, and he looked at me, he was a very pragmatic man, and he said, so, that's interesting, Mike. So what good is it? What good is it going to do? I thought, what good is it going to do? It's going to. I want to do science, right? Science, just for science. Because I love the query, right? But that always stuck with me. What good is it going to do? And so for a number of years, when I was doing different odd jobs and whatnot, in and out of school, I kept thinking, well, how am I going to make this do something good? I want to do something. I do want it to be worth something. And I ended up visiting Dr. Homer Buck. I don't know if you ever knew Homer. He was a world-class aquaculturist at the University of Illinois, Ken Mundy Research Station. Little tiny Illinois Natural History Survey as a research station in Ken Mundy. Tiniest little town in southern Illinois. And there was a notice of a field day there. And all I saw was the fish part. That's what caught my attention. Fish, field day, I'm bored, I'm living at home, I'm miserable, my girlfriend's somewhere, and I want to just get out of the house and see something. So I went on a weekend, and I saw ponds, and I saw this really bright researcher talking about how the Chinese raise multi-species of fish together in something called polyculture. A monoculture is where you have one species being raised, right? Like you got cattle out in the field. You don't have cattle and bison and antelope, right? Just cattle. Well, in fish, you usually have like catfish. That's it. But the Chinese are really astute. They understand that different fish species live in different ecological niches in the environment. So they have freshwater prawn on the bottom, scavenging, some carp species on the bottom, scavenging macrocrustaceans, like little clams and fairy shrimp and things. And then you have other fish in the water column, and then some other species of fish that would be grazing grasses along the edge. It's polyculture. Super efficient. like you produce like 3 or 4 times as many pounds of fish as your own would. So I'm watching this and I'm seeing it and I'm like, wow, it's aquatic biology and it's putting it to use. I kind of like this. So when I left, I went back and I started to look at stuff in the library, aquaculture. This is kind of novel. And then there's all this talk about how it's all global and I love to travel. I thought this is even more interesting. I wanted to do Peace Corps at the time. And so then I called him and I said, can I come down and like work? Can I like volunteer? And that began my career, basically. So I volunteered, I fell in love with it, it was intriguing. I developed a program at Illinois State University. It took about 5 years, but when I left, we had a program. Then I went to grad school and came here. So the point is, if you see me, this opportunity to be with you helps me share my passion, because I think you've got to be passionate with what you do. And I hope you guys, even though you're probably poultry people, or maybe not at all, maybe you're just, how many of you guys are just taking this just to get 3 hours credit? Okay. I've been there, I got it, no problem, okay? But I'm going to still instill some passion in this, because it's an amazing science. And it's amazing because, in my view, in terms of an applied biological profession, nothing's more complex. Now, the biochemists may disagree with me, but the reason because he's an awesome biochemist, believe me, but the reason I think it's so complex is because you have social elements like markets, personality, farmers, that's personality, right? You've got the science in and of itself, you've got the chemistry, but again, you've got this aquatic environment, which is always changing. I mean, it's a vibrant, vital environment. And you, as a producer, you're managing this every day, and it's changing all the time. So you've got to understand chemistry, some biology, some nutrition, and it's this nutritional component that is really the most significant. Because as a farmer, that's your bottom line. If you're a farmer raising fish, do you have any idea what is if you have, let's say, labor, power, and nutrition, like feeds, and the fish itself, the cost to purchase the fish, which one's the most costly from year to year in and year out?
Nutrition?
Well, obviously, because that's what I'm telling you this, right? So, yeah, but guess what percentage? 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, 70%. What percentage of your variable input annually is going to be the cost of feed?
60.
You're real close. I mean, I'm leading you on here just to save time. It's Friday.
I'll go 65.
You know, it's 50%. But the point is, very few people think that the cost of feed is that big of a deal. They're like, well, the labor, that's really high. Well, that's kind of expensive. Power, you're plugging stuff in. We don't plug that much stuff in the fish farm. But feed is 50%. So all the nutrition that we do, figuring out how much choline chloride you need, right? How efficient we are, not only at putting it in the diet, but keeping it in the diet and formulating it so that it works.
Not overfeeding.
And not overfeeding is huge. You know, one bag of feed is like this big, right? So let's say a farmer, and I don't want to digress here, but just to kind of leave you with this. So if a farmer has 20 ponds and he overfeeds one bag a day, over the course of a year, that will pay for his farm manager's expense. So feeds and nutrition matter, and while I get really bogged down myself, just so you know about it's tough for me. I don't let that interfere with the rest of why nutrition is important, because feeds are critical if you want to be a successful fish farmer, and if you want to be involved in this dynamic industry. Okay. One other, just a question to ask you. From now until the year 2050, tell me, is your best guess, how much the industry globally is going to grow?
It'll grow a lot with the rising population. can grow a lot of fish in a small amount.
How much, 10%?
20.
I was gonna say probably like 60%.
Well, you're getting the trend. It's about 50% is what the Food and Agriculture Organization is expecting. 50% in 30 years? My God, that's huge. And we are already, what percentage of all the fish that's consumed in the world right now is aquaculture as compared to wild caught?
80.
You guys are starting to do guesses now. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say lower. Is that like 60?
It's about 55%. But you consider that 20 years ago, it was like 5, or 30 years ago, it was like 5%. If you look at a growth curve of the industry production, it's just going like this. It's unbelievable. So that's kind of where I want to fuel some passion. I want to encourage some passion here because I think that, again, the dynamism of the industry is incredible. It's a global thing. So if you want to be part of something bigger than like your own little region, it's something you can be part of globally. And it's really necessary because all these billions of people, we can't feed them all beef. Okay, we're doing a great job with poultry. But there's a lot of opportunity for fish. Anyway, so one question I had maybe for you, but I want to kind of throw it their way a little bit too. I don't want to overstep what we have to talk about in terms of Fridays. So I live in Greenville. I hate Raleigh traffic, okay? And we haven't really determined yet how many lectures I'm going to give, but I've got a little list here. And I want to do as much as I can because I think it would be fun. It'd be really good. And yet I wonder if you guys all, do you guys have courses after this class or not? So if perhaps would it be possible to do some Monday, Wednesdays a little bit longer and not do a Friday? Is that possible?
That's fine with me.
Would that work for you guys?
I have a class Monday, Wednesday. Not
At what
Friday,
time?
but
Right
at
after
3.
this? At 3. So what time is it now?
2:48.
Okay. So you've got class in a few minutes.
No, on Fridays.
Not on Fridays.
It's weird, it meets Monday, Wednesday.
Well, maybe, we'll talk. Okay, so the other thing is, then what can we do maybe on some Fridays for some field trips?
So you just want to go see some fish farms and learn about.
Can we fish while we're there?
Well, there's maybe one place we might be able to, but yeah, that's kind of, I wouldn't focus on the fishing. Yeah, seeing the fish, but I'm thinking, for example, of touring a real feed mill, fish feed mill. It's a drive, it's gonna be a drive,
Yep.
okay? And I've got a state car, so I can get 3 people in a state car. I mean, we'll talk through all this, okay? But I can do that. And then, so we could do a feed mill, I'm thinking we could visit a hatchery, because I think one part of fish nutrition is larviculture. And fish larvae are like this big, and we gotta feed them. How do you feed a larval fish? So I think that's something that you guys would find really interesting. And then we could also go, and I was thinking we could visit, and one day we could go to a pond farm, a farm that has fish in ponds. And then that same afternoon, it would be a long afternoon, we could visit a farm that raises fish in tanks. And you could see, we could talk a little bit about how the fish are fed. Because one of the things that I want to talk about is more than just nutrition, right? I want to kind of show you how do we get the nutrients into the fish? Why is the feeding important? And the feed. Okay, because nutrients are nutrients, but it's more than just how something's assimilated. It's how do you make it happen? Is that of interest to you guys, or just want me to draw out some biochemical pathways?
That's interesting.
So if we were gonna go on field trips, is Friday the best?
Friday would be good.
You guys have classes before this?
I do.
Just before this?
Yeah, just before this. I get out.
What about a Saturday? You don't want to do Saturday. I'm just trying to see what you,
It's unpredictable.
okay.
Yeah.
So let's just see what we can come up, maybe just do some long Fridays.
Yeah. That'd be fun.
What do you have on Friday for class?
My stats class that meets once a week.
Once a week.
fine.
Half of it's online. I have to meet once a week.
Does it have to be on Friday?
Yeah, it has to be on Friday. That's the time my professor scheduled those, and that's the section I'm in.
And Friday's the only time you can do it. You guys can't work in.
Because my stat class meets Monday and Wednesday after this class.
Well, stats are important.
Statistics.
Well, we'll try to work out something,
Okay.
okay? I just think if you could see some stuff, you would get a different perspective than what we can do here in the classroom. And I think it would be more meaningful for you. Does that sound, no, if you're not interested in that, then we don't have to do it. I'm just offering that as an opportunity. I mean, seriously.
And especially he'd be interested too.
I know Tyler would love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fix the fish.
All right, great.
So we got to throw him the ball.
And you know, it's possible that maybe one of you guys may not be able to make, or in general, you may not be able to make all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay, we'll figure out a way to get you the material, maybe not even test you on that material or something.